You're standing in your kitchen at 3 a.m. and you notice the refrigerator door is slightly ajar. A carton of milk sits on the counter, a half-eaten sandwich on a plate beside it. But you don't remember getting up. You don't remember making that sandwich. You were asleep, or at least you thought you were. Your last memory is closing your eyes in bed hours ago. Yet here's the evidence that your body was up and moving, performing complex tasks while your conscious mind was somewhere else entirely. Welcome back to Midnight Deep Dive. If you're new here, welcome to our cozy corner of the internet where we explore history's most intriguing mysteries, designed to ease you gently into sleep. Wherever you are right now, I'm so glad you've decided to join me for this journey. Tonight, we're venturing into one of the most mysterious phenomena of human sleep, sleepwalking. It's something that affects millions of people, yet remains one of the strangest experiences our bodies can have. What happens when part of your brain wakes up while the rest stays asleep? Why do some people cook entire meals, send emails, or even drive cars without any memory of doing so? And what did our ancestors think was happening when they saw loved ones wandering the night with blank, unseeing eyes? So find your most comfortable position, let the day's tensions drift away, and join me as we explore the curious world of sleepwalking. Let's begin our journey with the people who witnessed sleepwalking long before anyone understood what it really was. Before sleep labs and brain scans, our ancestors watched in bewilderment as their loved ones rose from their beds in the middle of the night. Eyes open but unseeing, moving through familiar spaces as if guided by invisible hands. Without the tools of modern science, they created explanations that made sense within their understanding of the world. And those explanations were often tinged with supernatural dread. In ancient times, sleep itself was mysterious. People understood that we needed it, that we couldn't survive without it, but what happened during those hours of unconsciousness? The body lay still, vulnerable, while something, the soul, the spirit, consciousness itself, seemed to travel elsewhere. Dreams were visits to other realms, messages from gods or ancestors, prophecies requiring interpretation. Sleep was when the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds grew thin. So when someone got up and walked during sleep, when their body moved but their mind seemed absent, ancient peoples saw this as proof that something supernatural was occurring. The most common belief across many cultures was that the soul had left the body and was wandering, while something else, perhaps a spirit or demon, had taken temporary residence in the abandoned flesh. This explained the blank stare, the lack of recognition, the way sleepwalkers seem to be guided by knowledge they shouldn't possess in their unconscious state. Ancient Greek physicians, including Hippocrates and Galen, documented cases of what they called noctambulism, night walking. Galen, writing in the 2nd century CE, described patients who would rise from bed and perform various activities without any memory of doing so upon waking. He considered it a medical condition rather than purely supernatural, associating it with an imbalance of bodily humors. According to Galenic theory, an excess of phlegm or black bile could disturb the natural functions of sleep, causing the body to move while the rational mind remained asleep. Aristotle pondered sleepwalking in his work on sleep and dreams, suggesting that the sensitive part of the soul could be active while the rational part slept. This was a remarkably prescient observation. Thousands of years before neuroscience, Aristotle intuited that different parts of our mental apparatus could be in different states simultaneously. He noted that sleepwalkers could navigate obstacles and perform coordinated movements, suggesting that some form of perception and motor control remained active even in sleep's absence of consciousness. Medieval Europe brought darker interpretations. The Catholic Church, which held enormous influence over how people understood the world, viewed sleepwalking with suspicion. Some theologians argued that sleepwalking might be evidence of demonic possession or the influence of malevolent spirits. The reasoning followed medieval logic. If the soul was properly at rest in the body during sleep, then movement without conscious will must indicate that something else was controlling the body. This belief led to tragic consequences for some sleepwalkers, who were subjected to exorcisms or worse, accused of being in league with dark forces. Other medieval beliefs were less sinister, but equally supernatural. Some people thought sleepwalkers were actually visiting the spirit world, their bodies acting out journeys their souls were taking in another realm. Folk traditions spoke of the danger of waking a sleepwalker suddenly, believing that if the soul was traveling elsewhere, waking the body too quickly might prevent the soul from returning properly, leaving the person permanently damaged. This belief, though based on incorrect understanding, actually contained practical wisdom. Suddenly waking a sleepwalker can be startling and potentially dangerous, though not for supernatural reasons. In some cultures, sleepwalking was seen as a form of prophecy or spiritual gift. The sleepwalker, neither fully in the waking world nor fully in the realm of sleep and dreams, occupied a liminal space that might allow them to perceive things hidden from ordinary consciousness. Some sleepwalkers were consulted as oracles, their nighttime wanderings and utterances interpreted as messages from the divine or insights into hidden truths. Asian medical traditions offered different perspectives. Traditional Chinese medicine understood sleepwalking as an imbalance in the body's energy systems. During healthy sleep, the shen, the spirit or consciousness, should rest peacefully in its residence in the heart. Sleepwalking indicated that the shen was unsettled and wandering, unable to properly anchor itself during the night. This could be caused by various factors: blood deficiency that failed to properly house the shen, liver fire disturbing the spirit, or heart and kidney disharmony disrupting the body's natural rhythms. Indian Ayurvedic traditions similarly viewed sleepwalking as a disturbance in the body's natural balance. An excess of vata, the principle associated with air and movement, could cause restless sleep and nighttime wandering. Treatment focused on calming practices, warm foods and herbs that would ground and settle the overactive vata energy. What's fascinating about these ancient and traditional explanations is that while the frameworks were supernatural or based on humoral medicine rather than neuroscience, they often led to treatments that actually helped. Recommendations for regular sleep schedules, avoiding stimulating substances before bed, creating calm sleeping environments, and managing stress. These appear in ancient texts about sleepwalking and happen to align with what modern sleep medicine recommends. The first truly systematic medical observations of sleepwalking began emerging in the 17th and 18th centuries, as medicine slowly separated from mystical explanations. Physicians began keeping detailed case notes, documenting what sleepwalkers actually did, how long episodes lasted, and what seemed to trigger them. These observations revealed patterns. Sleepwalking was more common in children, tended to run in families, often occurred during times of stress or illness, and happened during particular parts of the night. One particularly detailed account comes from a French physician in the 18th century who documented a servant woman who would rise from bed multiple times per week, navigate through the house, sometimes prepare food, and once even climbed out onto a window ledge, all while completely asleep. He noted that she seemed to be able to avoid obstacles and navigate stairs without injury, suggesting that some level of sensory processing and motor coordination was preserved during sleepwalking. Upon waking, she remembered nothing of her nighttime activities. By the 19th century, sleepwalking had become the subject of genuine scientific curiosity. Doctors debated whether sleepwalkers were truly unconscious or in some altered state of consciousness. Some researchers tried to communicate with sleepwalkers during episodes, finding that sometimes the sleeper would respond to questions or commands, though they rarely remembered these interactions afterward. These experiments suggested that sleepwalking wasn't simple unconscious motor activity, but rather a complex state where certain mental functions operated while others remained dormant. The term somnambulism entered medical vocabulary during this period, from the Latin somnus, meaning sleep, and ambulare, meaning to walk. This clinical term helped establish sleepwalking as a legitimate medical phenomenon worthy of study, rather than a supernatural occurrence requiring spiritual intervention. What our ancestors got right, despite their supernatural frameworks, was recognizing that sleepwalking represented something genuinely unusual about human sleep. They observed that it wasn't simply movement during sleep, but a state where the person could perform complex behaviors while remaining fundamentally asleep. They noted its patterns: the blank stare, the lack of responsiveness to normal communication, the absence of memory afterward. And they understood, in their own terms, that sleep was not the simple on-off switch we might assume, but a complex state with its own mysteries. As we'll see in the next chapter, modern understanding of sleep stages would eventually explain what our ancestors could only describe. That sleepwalking occurs when the brain enters a peculiar hybrid state, with some regions awakening while others remain locked in sleep's embrace. For thousands of years, sleep was viewed as a simple state. You were either awake or you were asleep. It seemed obvious. When you closed your eyes and consciousness faded, you entered sleep, and you remained in that single state until morning when you woke. But this understanding was profoundly wrong, and discovering the true architecture of sleep, with its distinct stages, each serving different functions, would revolutionize our understanding of sleepwalking. The breakthrough came in the 1950s, though the groundwork had been laid earlier. In the 1920s, German psychiatrist Hans Berger invented the electroencephalogram, or EEG, a device that could measure the electrical activity of the brain through electrodes placed on the scalp. Berger discovered that the brain's electrical patterns changed between waking and sleeping. But the technology and understanding weren't yet sufficient to reveal sleep's true complexity. The revolution arrived in 1953, when researchers at the University of Chicago, led by Nathaniel Kleitman and his graduate student Eugene Aserinsky, made a discovery that would change sleep science forever. They were studying eye movements during sleep, using electrodes placed near subjects' eyes. What they found was unexpected. At certain times during the night, sleepers' eyes began moving rapidly beneath their closed lids, darting back and forth in bursts of activity. When awakened during these periods of rapid eye movement, subjects usually reported that they'd been dreaming. This was revolutionary. Sleep wasn't a uniform state of unconsciousness. It had distinct phases, and during one of those phases, which they called REM sleep for rapid eye movement, the brain became almost as active as during waking, producing the vivid experiences we call dreams. Kleitman and Aserinsky had discovered that every night our sleep cycles through different stages, each with its own characteristic brain wave patterns and physiological features. Further research by Kleitman and his next graduate student, William Dement, mapped out the complete architecture of sleep. They identified not just REM sleep, but several distinct stages of non-REM sleep, each characterized by different brain wave patterns. This research established the foundation for modern sleep science, and crucially for our purposes, provided the framework for understanding when and why sleepwalking occurs. Here's how sleep actually works. When you first fall asleep, you enter stage 1 non-REM sleep, a brief transitional phase lasting just a few minutes. Your brain waves slow down from their waking patterns, and you drift in that pleasant state between waking and sleeping, where you might experience those sudden muscle jerks called hypnic jerks. You're easily awakened during this stage, and if someone wakes you, you might not even realize you'd been asleep. Then you descend into stage 2 non-REM sleep, which makes up about half of your total sleep time. Your brain waves slow further, and your body temperature drops slightly. Your heart rate slows, and your muscles relax. This is real sleep, though not yet the deepest kind. If awakened from stage 2, you definitely know you'd been sleeping, though you might feel somewhat alert quickly. Next comes stage 3, also called slow wave sleep or deep sleep. and this is where things get interesting for understanding sleepwalking. During stage 3, your brain produces the slowest, largest amplitude brain waves called delta waves. This is the deepest phase of sleep, the most restorative and refreshing. During deep sleep, your body focuses on physical restoration. Growth hormone is released, tissues are repaired, the immune system is strengthened, and energy stores are replenished. Deep sleep is also when you're most difficult to awaken. If someone shakes you during deep sleep, you'll feel disoriented and groggy, taking minutes to fully regain alertness. Your body is deeply relaxed, but not paralyzed. This is important. And here's the crucial fact. Sleepwalking occurs during this stage, during the deepest phase of non-REM sleep. After spending time in deep sleep, you begin ascending back through the lighter stages, eventually entering REM sleep. During REM, your brain becomes highly active again, producing vivid dreams. But here's the fascinating part. During REM sleep, your voluntary muscles are essentially paralyzed, a state called REM atonia. This paralysis prevents you from acting out your dreams. Your eyes can move, you continue breathing, your heart beats. But the muscles that would let you walk or gesture or act are switched off. This muscle paralysis during REM is why sleepwalking almost never occurs during dream sleep. You might have incredibly vivid dreams where you're running or fighting or performing complex actions, but your body can't act them out. Sleepwalking happens during deep non-REM sleep, when your muscles aren't paralyzed, but your conscious awareness is profoundly diminished. A complete sleep cycle, moving through stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and then into REM, takes about 90 minutes. Each night, you cycle through these stages multiple times, usually 4 to 6 complete cycles. But the proportion of time spent in each stage changes as the night progresses. During the first sleep cycles of the night, you spend more time in deep stage 3 sleep. As morning approaches, you spend more time in lighter stage 2 sleep and REM sleep, with less time in deep sleep. This pattern explains why sleepwalking episodes most commonly occur in the first third of the night, usually within a few hours of falling asleep. This is when you're spending the most time in deep slow-wave sleep, the stage where sleepwalking originates. By dawn, when you're cycling through mostly lighter sleep and REM, the window for sleepwalking has largely closed. What happens in the brain during deep sleep that allows sleepwalking? Modern neuroimaging has revealed that during stage 3 sleep, large portions of the cerebral cortex, the brain's outer layer responsible for higher-level thinking, slow down dramatically. The prefrontal cortex, which handles executive functions like planning, decision-making, and self-awareness, shows very low activity during deep sleep. This explains why sleepwalkers don't make conscious decisions or form memories of their episodes. However, deeper brain structures, including areas controlling basic motor functions, balance, and navigation, can remain relatively active or can be activated even during deep sleep. This partial activation creates the strange hybrid state of sleepwalking, where someone can walk, navigate obstacles, and perform complex motor sequences, while the higher-level conscious awareness remains asleep. The discovery of sleep stages also explained something that had puzzled observers for centuries: why sleepwalkers sometimes seem to see and respond to their environment. During sleepwalking, sensory processing isn't completely offline. Visual information is being processed at some level, allowing navigation. Auditory information is registered, which is why sleepwalkers sometimes respond to voices, though in confused or inappropriate ways. But the integration of this sensory information with conscious awareness and memory formation isn't happening normally. Children spend more time in deep stage 3 sleep than adults, which partly explains why sleepwalking is much more common in childhood. A child's developing brain spends a higher percentage of the night in that deep sleep phase where sleepwalking can occur. As we age and our sleep architecture changes, with less time in deep sleep and more time in lighter stages, the tendency to sleepwalk typically decreases. Understanding sleep stages also revealed why certain factors trigger sleepwalking. Anything that increases the intensity or duration of deep sleep. Sleep deprivation, certain medications, fever, can increase the likelihood of sleepwalking episodes. Conversely, anything that fragments sleep or causes frequent awakenings can also trigger episodes by disrupting the normal progression through sleep stages. The architecture of sleep is elegant and complex, a nightly journey through different states of consciousness, each serving important functions for physical and mental health. Sleepwalking represents a breakdown in this architecture, a moment when the carefully orchestrated progression through sleep stages goes awry, and different parts of the brain end up in different states simultaneously. As we move into the next chapter, we'll explore exactly what's happening in the sleepwalker's brain, how this hybrid state emerges, why some people are more susceptible than others, and what modern neuroscience has revealed about the strange experience of being simultaneously asleep and mobile. Imagine your brain as an orchestra. During waking hours, all the sections play together in coordinated harmony. The strings of sensory processing, the brass of motor control, the woodwinds of memory formation, the percussion of attention and awareness, all following the conductor of consciousness. During normal sleep, most of the orchestra quiets, playing soft, slow movements. But during sleepwalking, something remarkable and strange happens. Some sections of the orchestra suddenly wake up and start playing while others remain in their sleeping state, creating a discordant piece where movement happens without awareness. Action occurs without memory. Modern neuroscience, using technologies like functional MRI and PET scans, has allowed researchers to peer inside the sleepwalking brain and see exactly which regions are active and which remain dormant during episodes. What they've discovered explains not just what sleepwalkers can do, but also what they can't, creating a clearer picture of this hybrid state of consciousness. During a sleepwalking episode, brain imaging shows that the motor cortex, the region responsible for voluntary movements, becomes activated. So do regions in the cerebellum and basal ganglia that coordinate movement, balance, and learned motor sequences. The visual processing areas show some activity, allowing navigation. This explains why sleepwalkers can walk, climb stairs, avoid furniture, and perform complex motor tasks. But simultaneously, large portions of the frontal lobes, particularly the prefrontal cortex responsible for executive function, planning, and self-awareness, remain in a sleep state. The hippocampus, crucial for forming new memories, shows minimal activity. The default mode network, associated with self-referential thinking and consciousness, stays quiet. This explains why sleepwalkers don't make rational decisions, can't remember what they're doing, and lack normal self-awareness. It's as if someone turned on the motor systems without booting up the conscious operating system. The hardware for movement is running, but the software for conscious thought isn't loaded. This creates the peculiar combination of capabilities and deficits that characterize sleepwalking. Complex motor behavior without rational thought, navigation without conscious awareness, actions without memory. Why does this happen? The most current understanding suggests that sleepwalking represents a disorder of arousal, an incomplete awakening from deep sleep. During normal arousal from sleep, all brain regions wake up together in a coordinated fashion. But in people prone to sleepwalking, certain brain regions can wake up while others remain locked in deep sleep. This creates the hybrid state where movement occurs without consciousness. Genetics plays a significant role in who experiences this neurological quirk. If one parent was a childhood sleepwalker, their children have about a 45% chance of sleepwalking. If both parents were sleepwalkers, that chance rises to about 60%. Twin studies show that identical twins are much more likely to share sleepwalking tendencies than fraternal twins, confirming a strong genetic component. Researchers have identified specific genetic variations associated with sleepwalking, though the picture is complex, with multiple genes involved. Some of these genes affect how the brain regulates sleep-wake transitions. Others influence the depth of slow-wave sleep or the brain's response to sleep deprivation. It's not a single gene that causes sleepwalking, but rather a combination of genetic variations that make someone's brain more susceptible to these incomplete arousals from deep sleep. The developing brain shows particular vulnerability to sleepwalking. In children, the brain is still maturing, and the systems that coordinate arousal from sleep aren't yet fully developed. The pathways between different brain regions are still forming and refining. This immaturity makes incomplete arousals more likely. The motor systems might activate before the consciousness systems can properly engage. As the brain matures through adolescence into adulthood, these systems typically become better coordinated, which is why most childhood sleepwalkers outgrow the condition. Age-related changes in sleep architecture compound this developmental factor. Young children spend up to 40% of their sleep time in deep, slow-wave sleep, compared to about 20% for adults. This extended time in the sleep stage where sleepwalking occurs creates more opportunities for episodes. As children age and their sleep patterns mature, they spend less time in deep sleep, reducing the window when sleepwalking can occur. But what about adults who continue to sleepwalk, or who develop sleepwalking later in life? For adults, sleepwalking often reflects ongoing issues with sleep-wake regulation rather than developmental immaturity. Some adults retain the genetic susceptibility from childhood, and episodes are triggered by factors that destabilize sleep. Stress, sleep deprivation, medications, or other conditions affecting sleep quality. Adult-onset sleepwalking, episodes that begin for the first time in adulthood, deserves particular attention because it can sometimes signal underlying neurological conditions. While occasional sleepwalking in response to stress or sleep loss isn't necessarily concerning, new-onset frequent sleepwalking in adults should be evaluated by a sleep specialist. It can occasionally be an early sign of neurodegenerative conditions, though this is relatively rare. The neurotransmitter systems that regulate sleep and waking also play crucial roles in sleepwalking. GABA, the main inhibitory neurotransmitter in the brain, is heavily involved in promoting sleep and maintaining sleep depth. Serotonin and norepinephrine help regulate arousal and the transitions between sleep states. Disruptions in these neurotransmitter systems can destabilize sleep architecture and increase the likelihood of incomplete arousals. This explains why certain medications can trigger or worsen sleepwalking. Medications that enhance deep sleep, like some sleeping pills, can paradoxically increase sleepwalking risk by intensifying slow-wave sleep. Antidepressants that affect serotonin levels can alter sleep architecture in ways that promote episodes. Stimulant medications taken too late in the day can fragment sleep, creating more opportunities for confused arousals. Alcohol presents a particularly complex relationship with sleepwalking. In the short term, alcohol promotes sleepiness and can deepen the first part of the night's sleep, increasing time in slow-wave sleep when sleepwalking occurs. But alcohol also fragments sleep later in the night and disrupts normal sleep architecture. The combination can create ideal conditions for sleepwalking. Deeper slow-wave sleep, combined with increased arousals, creates more opportunities for the brain to enter that hybrid state. Sleep deprivation has a fascinating effect on the sleepwalking brain. When you're sleep deprived, your body compensates during the next sleep period by spending even more time in deep, slow-wave sleep. It's trying to catch up on the most restorative sleep stage. This sleep pressure increases the intensity of deep sleep, making partial arousals more likely. It's as if the brain is sleeping so deeply that when something triggers a partial awakening, the arousal is incomplete. Some systems wake, while others remain profoundly asleep. The threshold for arousal during deep sleep varies between individuals and can be influenced by multiple factors. Some people have naturally high arousal thresholds. Once asleep, they're very difficult to awaken. Others have lower thresholds and wake more easily. People with high arousal thresholds are more likely to experience sleepwalking because when something does trigger arousal from their deep sleep, the awakening is more likely to be incomplete and partial. What triggers these arousals? Internal factors include a full bladder, hunger, pain, or changes in body temperature. External factors might be noises, lights, touches, or environmental changes. Even stress and anxiety can lower the threshold for arousal, making the sleeping brain more reactive to stimuli. In children, normal developmental processes like teething or growth spurts can trigger episodes. The sleepwalking brain also shows interesting patterns in how it processes information. Studies where researchers carefully observed and tested sleepwalkers during episodes found that sleepwalkers can respond to simple commands. Sit down, stop, go back to bed. They can sometimes answer simple questions, though responses are often confused or nonsensical. This indicates that auditory information is being processed and that some level of language comprehension remains active. However, the processing is degraded and incomplete. Sleepwalkers don't engage in normal conversation. They can't process complex information or make reasoned decisions. Their responses are often delayed, confused, or contextually inappropriate. It's as if the language centers are running in low-power mode, able to handle simple input but not capable of normal function. Similarly, visual processing during sleepwalking is partial. Sleepwalkers navigate their environment, avoid obstacles, and can sometimes perform visually guided tasks. This requires that visual information be processed and used to guide movement. But sleepwalkers don't see in the normal conscious sense. Their eyes are often only partially open, their gaze is glassy and unfocused, and they don't make normal eye contact or respond to visual social cues. The emotional processing centers of the brain show variable activity during sleepwalking. Some episodes appear emotionally neutral, with the sleepwalker calmly walking around. Other episodes can involve intense emotions, particularly fear or confusion, especially when the episode transitions into a sleep terror. This variability suggests that the limbic system, the brain's emotional processing center, can be variably activated during different episodes or in different individuals. One of the most striking features of the sleepwalking brain is the absence of memory formation. The hippocampus, essential for creating new episodic memories, remains largely inactive during episodes. Even when sleepwalkers seem to be processing information in the moment, they're not encoding it into long-term memory. This is why they almost never remember their episodes, or if they do, they have only fragmentary, dreamlike impressions rather than clear memories. This amnesia is complete and consistent. Unlike someone who's had a bit too much to drink and might have patchy memories of the evening, sleepwalkers retain virtually nothing of their episodes. The brain mechanisms for encoding experience into memory simply aren't engaged. It's as if the episode happens in a separate reality that isn't recorded into the person's life story. Understanding the neuroscience of sleepwalking reveals it as a fundamentally neurological phenomenon rather than a psychological one. While stress and emotions can trigger episodes by affecting sleep quality, sleepwalking itself is a quirk of brain function, a breakdown in the normal coordination between different brain regions during arousal from sleep. It's not about suppressed desires, not about acting out dreams, not about psychological disturbance. It's about the brain entering a state where movement and consciousness become uncoupled. As we move into the next chapter, we'll explore what this hybrid brain state actually looks like in practice. The range of behaviors sleepwalkers exhibit, the eerie characteristics that make sleepwalking so recognizable, and the spectrum from simple wandering to complex actions that can seem almost purposeful despite occurring in the absence of conscious awareness. If you've ever witnessed someone sleepwalking, you'll never forget it. There's something deeply unsettling about seeing a person moving through space with their eyes open, yet clearly not present in the normal sense. The vacant stare, the mechanical movements, the lack of normal social responsiveness. It all combines to create an uncanny valley experience, watching someone who looks awake but fundamentally isn't. Sleepwalking exists on a spectrum, ranging from the barely noticeable to the dramatic and potentially dangerous. At the mild end, someone might simply sit up in bed, look around with that characteristic blank stare, maybe mumble something incomprehensible, and then lie back down and return to normal sleep. This type of episode might last only seconds or a minute or two, and unless someone happens to be watching, it might go entirely unnoticed. A step up in complexity, the sleepwalker might get out of bed and stand near it, perhaps touching or rearranging objects on a nightstand. They might walk to the bathroom and back, successfully navigating their route, but doing so with unusual slowness or awkwardness. These episodes might last a few minutes and typically end with the person returning to bed, though they might lie down in slightly odd positions or places. In moderate sleepwalking episodes, the person leaves their bedroom and moves through other parts of their home. They might walk up and down stairs, open and close doors, turn lights on or off, or move objects around. The movements often have a somewhat purposeful quality, as if the person is trying to accomplish something, though the actual goal is unclear. They might appear to be looking for something, examining objects without actually engaging with them meaningfully. During these episodes, the sleepwalker's eyes are typically open, but their gaze has a distinctive quality, glassy, unfocused, staring through rather than at things. Their facial expression is usually blank or confused, lacking the normal responsiveness and mobility we associate with waking consciousness. If they encounter another person, they might look toward them but don't make normal eye contact. There's no spark of recognition, no social acknowledgement, just that empty stare. The movements during sleepwalking have their own peculiar character. While sleepwalkers can walk and navigate, their gait is often slightly off, maybe slower than normal or with less coordination. They might bump into things more than they would when awake, though they generally avoid major obstacles. Their movements lack the fluidity and confidence of waking behavior, suggesting that while basic motor control is active, the fine-tuning we normally apply to movement is diminished. More complex sleepwalking episodes involve purposeful-seeming behaviors. The person might get dressed, though often putting clothes on incorrectly or choosing inappropriate items. They might open the refrigerator and eat, sometimes consuming food in unusual ways or eating things they wouldn't normally eat. Some sleepwalkers have been found preparing meals, using appliances, rearranging furniture, or attempting to do household chores in the middle of the night. These complex behaviors can be remarkably sophisticated. There are documented cases of sleepwalkers who have cooked complete meals, used computers to send emails, often with confused or nonsensical content, played musical instruments, or engaged in crafts or hobbies. The person is drawing on learned motor sequences and skills, executing them while their conscious mind remains asleep. It's automatic behavior, like how you can sometimes drive a familiar route while your mind is elsewhere, but taken to an extreme where there's no conscious mind engaged at all. Communication during sleepwalking is possible but strange. If you speak to a sleepwalker, they might respond, but the responses are typically slow, confused, or contextually inappropriate. They might answer questions with yes or no, but they can't engage in normal conversation. Their speech, when it occurs, is often slurred or mumbled, with words sometimes running together or making little logical sense. This is called somnoloquy, sleep talking, and it often accompanies sleepwalking episodes. The emotional quality of sleepwalking episodes varies. Many episodes appear emotionally neutral, with the sleepwalker calmly moving through their activities without apparent distress. But some episodes carry emotional content, confusion, agitation, or fear. When fear is present, the episode may be transitioning into or overlapping with a sleep terror, another parasomnia that shares sleepwalking's origin in deep sleep, but has a more intense emotional component. Sleep terrors, which we'll explore more later, are different from nightmares. During a sleep terror, the person appears intensely frightened, screaming, thrashing with racing heart and rapid breathing. They might bolt upright or leap from bed, sometimes running or trying to escape from a perceived threat. Their eyes are wide open, they may be sweating heavily, and they appear absolutely terrified. Yet they're not awake and not responding to the actual environment. Attempts to comfort or hold them are usually ineffective and might increase their agitation. The duration of sleepwalking episodes varies considerably. Brief episodes might last just a minute or two. More extended episodes can continue for 30 minutes or even longer, though episodes over an hour are rare. During longer episodes, the sleepwalker might move through many different locations and engage in multiple different activities before eventually returning to bed or being guided back by someone else. How episodes end varies. Many sleepwalkers simply return to bed on their own, lie down, and resume normal sleep without ever properly waking. Others might stop wherever they are, confused about how they got there if they partially wake, or simply transition back to sleep in the new location. If awakened during an episode, the sleepwalker typically experiences several minutes of confusion and disorientation, not immediately understanding where they are or what they've been doing. The frequency of sleepwalking episodes also exists on a spectrum. Some people sleepwalk only occasionally, perhaps a few times per year in response to specific triggers like stress or sleep deprivation. Others sleepwalk more regularly, perhaps several times per month. A small percentage of sleepwalkers have very frequent episodes, walking nearly every night. Frequency often relates to the severity of the underlying sleep-wake regulation issues and the presence or absence of triggering factors. Children and adults show some different patterns in their sleepwalking. Children are more likely to have regular, predictable episodes, often occurring within the first few hours of sleep on nights when they're particularly tired. Adult sleepwalking episodes are more likely to be irregular and triggered by specific factors like stress, alcohol, or medications. Children often grow out of sleepwalking as their brains mature, while adults who sleepwalk may continue experiencing episodes throughout life. One particularly interesting variant is sleep-related eating disorder, where people engage in eating episodes during sleep. Unlike someone who simply wanders to the kitchen during a sleepwalking episode and happens to eat something, people with sleep-related eating disorder have repeated episodes focused specifically on eating. They might consume large amounts of food, eat unusual combinations or even non-food items, and have no memory of these episodes. This can lead to unwanted weight gain, injuries from preparing food while asleep, and considerable distress. Sexual behaviors during sleep, called sexsomnia, represent another complex category. These are not dreams about sex. They're actual physical sexual behaviors occurring during deep sleep, from masturbation to initiating sexual contact with bed partners. Like other sleepwalking behaviors, the person has no conscious awareness or memory of these behaviors. This can create significant relationship problems, confusion, and distress, particularly when the sleeping behaviors don't match the person's waking preferences, or when they involve inappropriate or unwanted contact. The key feature that unites all these varied behaviors is the combination of motor activity with absent conscious awareness and memory. Whether someone is simply walking around their bedroom or engaging in complex behaviors, they're doing so in a brain state where the usual integration of action with consciousness isn't happening. They're not dreaming about doing these things and acting them out. They're doing them while in deep sleep, without the conscious experience that normally accompanies our actions. Recognizing sleepwalking when you encounter it is usually straightforward once you know what to look for. The blank stare and lack of normal responsiveness are the most obvious signs. The person doesn't engage normally with their environment or with other people. Their movements, while purposeful seeming, often have that slightly mechanical quality. And if you speak to them, you'll notice they're not quite there. Responses are slow, confused, or absent. As we move forward, we'll explore what triggers these episodes. The factors that can take someone from normal sleep into this hybrid state where movement occurs without awareness, action happens without memory, and the brain finds itself caught between sleeping and waking without being truly either one. Understanding what pushes someone from normal sleep into sleepwalking helps demystify this condition and provides practical strategies for reducing episodes. While some people are genetically more susceptible to sleepwalking, whether episodes actually occur often depends on triggering factors that destabilize sleep or intensify deep, slow-wave sleep. Let's explore what awakens the night wanderer. Sleep deprivation stands at the top of the list of sleepwalking triggers. When you don't get enough sleep, your body accumulates what researchers call sleep debt. Your brain needs a certain amount of sleep, particularly deep, restorative, slow-wave sleep, and when it doesn't get that, it keeps a running tally of what's owed. When you finally do sleep after being sleep-deprived, your brain tries to catch up by spending more time in the deepest stages of sleep. This rebound deep sleep is more intense than normal. Your brain is essentially saying, "We desperately need restoration, so we're going all in on the deepest, most restorative sleep stage." This intensified deep sleep creates ideal conditions for sleepwalking. You're sleeping so profoundly that when anything triggers arousal, that awakening is more likely to be incomplete. Part of the brain says, "Wake up," but part says, "No, we need this sleep desperately," and you end up in that hybrid state of sleepwalking. For people with sleepwalking tendencies, pulling an all-nighter, working rotating shifts, or even just consistently getting a couple hours less sleep than they need can dramatically increase episode frequency. Parents of young sleepwalkers often notice that episodes cluster around times when normal sleep routines are disrupted. Vacations, holidays, or busy periods where bedtimes become irregular. Irregular sleep schedules present similar issues. Your body has an internal clock, the circadian rhythm, that regulates sleep-wake cycles. This clock works best with consistency, going to bed and waking up at roughly the same times each day. When sleep timing varies dramatically, staying up late on weekends, napping at irregular times, or working night shifts, the coordination between your circadian clock and your sleep-wake systems becomes disrupted. This disruption can destabilize the normal architecture of sleep. The carefully orchestrated progression through sleep stages becomes less reliable. The transitions between stages might become rougher, creating more opportunities for partial arousals where some brain regions wake while others remain asleep. For people predisposed to sleepwalking, maintaining regular sleep schedules can significantly reduce episode frequency. Stress and anxiety powerfully affect sleep architecture. When you're stressed, your brain produces more cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. Elevated cortisol interferes with the normal progression of sleep, making it more fragmented and less restorative. You might fall asleep easily enough from exhaustion, but your sleep becomes lighter and more easily disrupted throughout the night. Stress also increases hyperarousal. Your brain and body remain in a more activated state even during sleep. This means the threshold for arousal from deep sleep decreases. Noises, movements, internal stimuli that would normally be ignored during sleep might trigger arousal. When arousal occurs from deep sleep in someone predisposed to sleepwalking, incomplete awakening becomes more likely. People often report increased sleepwalking during stressful life periods. Exams, work deadlines, relationship difficulties, major life changes. The mechanism isn't that stress causes sleepwalking directly, but rather that stress destabilizes sleep in ways that increase the likelihood of episodes in susceptible individuals. Fever, particularly in children, is a well-known sleepwalking trigger. When the body is fighting infection, temperature regulation changes, and the immune system's signaling molecules affect brain function. Fever intensifies deep sleep as the body focuses resources on fighting infection. Young children with even mild fevers might experience sleepwalking episodes even if they don't typically sleepwalk, and children who do regularly sleepwalk often have more frequent or intense episodes when feverish. Certain medications can trigger or worsen sleepwalking by affecting sleep architecture or neurotransmitter systems involved in sleep regulation. Sedative hypnotic medications, including some sleeping pills, can deepen sleep in ways that paradoxically increase parasomnia risk. These medications intensify slow-wave sleep, but can also make arousals from that sleep more confused and incomplete. Antidepressants, particularly selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, can affect sleep architecture by altering serotonin levels, which play crucial roles in regulating sleep stages. Some people who never sleepwalked before starting antidepressants begin experiencing episodes. This doesn't mean these medications shouldn't be used. Their benefits for treating depression and anxiety usually outweigh parasomnia risks, but it's something to be aware of and discuss with prescribing physicians. Stimulant medications for ADHD, if taken too late in the day, can fragment sleep by maintaining higher arousal levels into the night. The disrupted sleep that results can increase parasomnia risk. Similarly, certain blood pressure medications, particularly beta blockers, can affect melatonin production and alter sleep patterns in ways that might trigger sleepwalking in susceptible individuals. Alcohol deserves special attention because its effects on sleep are complex and often misunderstood. Many people believe alcohol helps sleep because it makes them drowsy and helps them fall asleep faster. Initially, alcohol does promote sleepiness by enhancing GABA, the brain's main inhibitory neurotransmitter. In the first part of the night after drinking, you might fall into a deep sleep quickly. But as alcohol is metabolized, several hours into sleep, its effects reverse. You experience what researchers call rebound arousal. The brain becomes more activated, sleep becomes lighter and more fragmented, and you might experience frequent awakenings. The combination of intensified deep sleep early in the night followed by fragmented sleep later creates perfect conditions for sleepwalking. The deep sleep provides the setting, and the fragmentation provides the trigger for incomplete arousal. For people with sleepwalking tendencies, even moderate drinking can trigger episodes. The relationship isn't directly dose-dependent. More alcohol doesn't necessarily mean more sleepwalking. Rather, the specific timing and sleep-disrupting effects create vulnerabilities. Chronic heavy drinking creates even more severe sleep disturbances and can worsen parasomnia frequency and intensity. Environmental factors can also trigger sleepwalking episodes. Unfamiliar sleeping environments commonly precipitate episodes in people who don't regularly sleepwalk at home. Sleeping in a hotel, at a friend's house, or even moving to a new home can increase episode frequency. The brain processes the novelty even during sleep, and this increased processing might make arousals more likely or more confused. Noise represents another environmental trigger. While most people adapt to consistent background noise, sudden or unpredictable sounds can trigger arousals from deep sleep. A dog barking, a car alarm, someone else in the house getting up, or even sounds from neighboring apartments might be enough to initiate that partial awakening that becomes sleepwalking. Temperature affects sleep quality and parasomnia risk. Sleeping in a room that's too hot or too cold creates discomfort that the sleeping brain registers. Your body naturally cools down during sleep as part of normal circadian rhythm, and maintaining that optimal sleep temperature supports stable sleep architecture. Disruptions to temperature regulation, whether from room temperature, too many or too few blankets, or hormonal changes affecting thermoregulation, can destabilize sleep and increase parasomnia risk. Sleeping with a full bladder creates physical discomfort that can trigger arousal from deep sleep. For children who are potty training or who haven't fully established nighttime bladder control, the sensation of needing to urinate might trigger sleepwalking episodes where they get up and walk toward the bathroom, or sometimes just walk around without fully waking. Obstructive sleep apnea, a condition where breathing repeatedly stops and starts during sleep, creates frequent arousals throughout the night. While these arousals are usually brief and often not remembered, they fragment sleep architecture. In people susceptible to sleepwalking, the combination of deep sleep pressure from the sleep being disrupted and frequent arousals from the breathing interruptions can increase sleepwalking episodes. Treating the apnea often reduces parasomnias. Restless leg syndrome, where people experience uncomfortable sensations in their legs and an irresistible urge to move them, typically worsens during rest and sleep. The resulting movements and discomfort can trigger arousals. When these arousals occur from deep sleep in someone predisposed to sleepwalking, partial awakenings can result. Pregnancy presents a unique cluster of sleepwalking triggers. Hormonal changes affect sleep architecture. Physical discomfort from the growing belly makes comfortable sleep positions harder to find. Frequent urination interrupts sleep, and anxiety about the coming changes can increase stress. Women who sleepwalked as children sometimes experience a resurgence of episodes during pregnancy, even if they haven't sleepwalked in years. For many people, sleepwalking episodes cluster around predictable patterns once triggers are identified. A person might notice they only sleepwalk after particularly stressful days, or when they've had less than 6 hours of sleep, or after drinking alcohol. This predictability, while it doesn't eliminate the problem, at least provides some sense of control and the ability to implement preventive strategies during high-risk periods. Understanding triggers transforms sleepwalking from a random, frightening occurrence into something more manageable. While genetic susceptibility creates vulnerability, whether episodes actually occur often depends on modifiable factors. As we'll explore in later chapters, this understanding provides the foundation for effective management strategies. But first, we need to acknowledge the potential dangers of sleepwalking and why safety considerations matter so much. There's a common myth that you should never wake a sleepwalker because they might die of fright, have a heart attack, or suffer some terrible consequence. This is completely false. You can wake a sleepwalker, and doing so won't harm them, though they'll likely be very confused and disoriented for several minutes. The real danger isn't in waking them. It's in what they might do while sleepwalking, and how to create environments where episodes can occur without resulting in injury. Let's start with the most common risks. Sleepwalkers navigate their environment while their conscious awareness is offline. They can perceive enough to avoid major obstacles like furniture or walls, at least most of the time, but their spatial awareness and judgment are impaired. They're operating on autopilot, and that autopilot isn't as sophisticated as conscious navigation. Simple injuries are common. Bumping into furniture, stubbing toes, banging shins on bed frames, or walking into door frames all occur regularly. These aren't usually serious, resulting in bruises or minor cuts, but they're uncomfortable and contribute to the overall disruption of sleep quality. Some sleepwalkers accumulate a pattern of unexplained bruises they discover the next morning. Falls represent more serious risks, particularly when stairs are involved. Sleepwalkers can successfully navigate stairs. Their motor control includes the ability to climb up and down, but their perception of stair edges is less precise than when awake. Their balance is somewhat impaired, and they might misjudge the number of steps or the height of each step. Falls down stairs during sleepwalking episodes can result in significant injuries, including broken bones, head trauma, and sprains. Windows present particularly concerning risks. Sleepwalkers have been known to open windows and attempt to climb out, sometimes from upper story rooms. They're not consciously trying to exit the house through the window. Rather, the window might register as a doorway or exit point in their confused state. There are documented cases of serious injuries and even deaths from falls through windows during sleepwalking episodes. Leaving the house represents a major safety concern. Sleepwalkers can unlock doors, open them, and walk outside, all while remaining asleep. Once outside, they might wander into streets, encounter traffic, become disoriented if they partially wake up far from home, or expose themselves to weather conditions dangerous for someone barefoot and in sleeping clothes. Urban environments with traffic, rural environments with bodies of water or rough terrain, and cold climates where exposure risks exist all present serious dangers. Driving during sleep is one of the most dangerous things sleepwalkers can do, and while relatively rare, it does occur. Cases have been documented of people getting into their cars, starting them, and driving while in a sleepwalking state. The behaviors range from backing out of the driveway and then stopping in confusion, to driving for several miles before having an accident or being pulled over by police. These incidents are terrifying because the person is operating heavy machinery at speed with diminished awareness and judgment. Cooking and using appliances during sleepwalking episodes creates obvious risks. Turning on stoves, using sharp knives, or operating other potentially dangerous appliances all occur during complex sleepwalking episodes. The person might be trying to prepare food, drawing on learned routines, but without the full awareness needed to do these activities safely. Burns, cuts, and fire hazards all result from these behaviors. Violence during sleepwalking episodes is rare but deserves mention because when it occurs, it can be serious. The violence isn't typically targeted or intentional. The sleepwalker isn't consciously choosing to harm someone. Rather, if they're in a confused or frightened state, particularly if an episode overlaps with a sleep terror, they might lash out, push, or strike when someone tries to approach or restrain them. They're not recognizing the person as a loved one. They're responding to a perceived threat in their confused state. There have been legal cases involving serious violence during alleged sleepwalking episodes, including homicides. These cases are controversial and complex, requiring extensive investigation to determine whether the person was genuinely sleepwalking or fabricating a defense. Legitimate sleepwalking violence typically occurs only when the sleepwalker is confronted or restrained, happens during the first third of the night when deep sleep predominates, and the person has a documented history of parasomnia. Deliberate, goal-directed violence is not consistent with true sleepwalking states. So how do you make environments safer for sleepwalkers? The principle is simple. Since you can't always prevent episodes, you create conditions where episodes can occur without resulting in injury. For stairs, safety gates designed for young children can be installed at the top of staircases. These prevent sleepwalkers from accessing stairs while asleep. The gates should be tall enough and secure enough that they can't be easily climbed over or pushed through. Some families use alarms that sound when gates are opened, alerting others in the house that the sleepwalker is mobile. Bedroom doors can be fitted with alarms that sound when opened, alerting family members that an episode is occurring. These don't wake the sleepwalker themselves. They're alerting others who can then gently guide the person back to bed. Various commercial products exist, from simple door alarms to more sophisticated motion sensors. Windows should be secured, particularly those above the first floor. Window locks, stops that prevent windows from opening more than a few inches, or even guards that allow ventilation but prevent a person from fitting through all serve as protective measures. Ground floor windows might also need securing if they provide access to dangerous areas like swimming pools or busy streets. Doors leading outside should have locks positioned where sleepwalkers are less likely to access them. High deadbolts, chain locks, or even key-required locks where the key is kept in a location not accessible during sleepwalking. Some families use doorbells or chimes on exterior doors that alert them if those doors are opened. The sleeping environment itself should be kept clear of obstacles where possible. Furniture arrangements that provide clear pathways reduce the chance of injuries from bumping into things. Sharp-edged furniture might be temporarily replaced or padded. Items that could cause injury if knocked over should be secured or moved. Locking up or removing access to car keys prevents sleep driving incidents. Keys should be kept in locations not easily found during sleepwalking, and some families add extra security by installing devices that prevent cars from starting without specific actions unlikely to be performed during sleepwalking. Kitchen hazards can be reduced by ensuring stoves are turned off and can't be easily activated. Some modern stoves have child lock features that require specific button sequences to turn on. Knives and other sharp implements can be stored in locked drawers or cabinets. Unplugging certain appliances overnight provides additional safety. For children, ensuring the sleeping environment is safe often involves many of the same strategies: door alarms, window locks, clear pathways. Additionally, ensuring the child's bladder is empty before bed can reduce episodes triggered by the need to urinate. Maintaining consistent, adequate sleep schedules reduces sleep deprivation as a trigger. What should you do if you encounter someone sleepwalking? The goal is to gently guide them back to bed without startling them or causing distress. Speak calmly and softly, using simple phrases. "It's time to go back to bed. Come this way. Let's go to your room." Avoid shouting, shaking, or making sudden movements. You can gently take the person by the arm or shoulder and guide them back toward their bedroom. Most sleepwalkers will comply with gentle physical guidance, following where they're led. They might murmur responses or seem partially aware, but this compliance doesn't indicate they're actually awake. If the sleepwalker becomes agitated or resistant, don't force the issue. Give them space, ensure they're in a safe location, and wait to see if they return to bed on their own. Only if they're in immediate danger should you risk the increased agitation that might come from more forceful intervention. If you do need to wake a sleepwalker, for instance, if they're about to do something dangerous and gentle guidance isn't working, do so gradually and from a safe distance. Call their name, speak more loudly, turn on lights. As they begin to wake, expect confusion. They might not recognize where they are or why you're there. Give them time to fully wake and orient themselves. Reassure them calmly and explain what happened once they're fully awake. The myth about never waking sleepwalkers probably arose from the fact that being woken abruptly from deep sleep is unpleasant for anyone. We all experience confusion and grogginess when awakened from deep sleep, and for a sleepwalker who's already confused, this can be intensified. But there's no medical danger in waking them. The danger lies in letting them continue potentially dangerous behaviors. For adults who live alone and sleepwalk, safety considerations become even more important. You can't rely on someone else to guide you back to bed, so environmental modifications become essential. Some people set up their bedrooms to essentially lock them in safely. Door alarms that would wake them if they left the room, windows secured, and all potentially dangerous items removed from the bedroom. Medical alert systems or smartphone apps that detect unusual movement patterns during sleep hours can provide some monitoring for solo living sleepwalkers. These systems can alert emergency contacts if unusual activity is detected at night, though they're not perfect solutions. The psychological impact of dangerous episodes shouldn't be underestimated. Waking up to discover you've injured yourself, damaged property, or put yourself in danger creates anxiety about sleep itself. This anxiety can worsen sleep quality, potentially increasing episode frequency in a negative feedback loop. Working with sleep specialists and therapists familiar with parasomnias can help manage this anxiety. For parents of sleepwalking children, the stress of worrying about their child's safety can be significant. Parents might feel they need to maintain hypervigilance throughout the night, leading to their own sleep deprivation and exhaustion. Setting up appropriate safety measures allows parents to feel more secure that their child is protected, even if an episode occurs without immediate parental awareness. The good news is that with appropriate safety measures, most people with sleepwalking disorders can live safely. The condition is manageable through a combination of environmental modification, trigger avoidance, and sometimes treatment approaches we'll explore in the next chapter. Understanding the risks allows for appropriate responses without unnecessary fear, creating safety without turning the home into a fortress or making sleep itself a source of anxiety. For most people, particularly children, sleepwalking is something they'll outgrow without any specific treatment. The developing brain matures, sleep architecture stabilizes, and episodes gradually become less frequent before stopping entirely. But for those who continue experiencing episodes into adulthood, or for whom episodes are frequent or dangerous enough to require intervention, what can actually be done? The good news is that sleepwalking is highly manageable through a combination of strategies. The foundation of sleepwalking management is what sleep specialists call sleep hygiene. Basically, all the practices that support healthy, stable sleep. This might sound simple, but for many people with sleepwalking tendencies, improving sleep hygiene significantly reduces episode frequency without requiring any medical intervention. Consistent sleep schedules are crucial. Going to bed and waking up at the same times every day, even on weekends, helps stabilize circadian rhythms and sleep architecture. The brain comes to expect sleep at certain times, and the transitions between sleep stages become smoother and more reliable. For sleepwalkers, this consistency can reduce the likelihood of those confused, partial arousals that trigger episodes. Getting adequate sleep is equally important. Most adults need 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night, while children and teenagers need even more. Chronic sleep deprivation is one of the strongest triggers for sleepwalking, so simply ensuring sufficient sleep duration can dramatically reduce episodes. For people who have been functioning on inadequate sleep, this might mean restructuring schedules to prioritize sleep, which can feel challenging but often has benefits beyond reducing sleepwalking. The sleeping environment matters more than many people realize. The bedroom should be cool. Around 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit is optimal for most people. It should be dark with blackout curtains or eye masks blocking light that might trigger arousals. It should be quiet, or if ambient noise is unavoidable, white noise machines can mask disturbing sounds. The bed itself should be comfortable, and the room should be primarily associated with sleep rather than work or entertainment. Pre-sleep routines help the brain prepare for sleep and make the transition smoother. A consistent routine of relaxing activities in the hour before bed signals to your brain that sleep is approaching. This might include reading, gentle stretching, listening to calm music, taking a warm bath, or meditation. Screens, phones, tablets, computers, televisions should be avoided before bed because the blue light they emit suppresses melatonin production and keeps the brain in a more activated state. Stress management during waking hours indirectly improves sleep quality. Regular exercise, mindfulness practices, therapy for anxiety or depression, and healthy coping mechanisms all reduce the overall stress load that can destabilize sleep. For people whose sleepwalking increases during stressful periods, addressing the stress itself often reduces episodes more effectively than focusing only on the sleepwalking. Avoiding triggers is straightforward in principle, though sometimes challenging in practice. If alcohol triggers your sleepwalking, avoiding alcohol, particularly in the hours before bed, helps. If certain medications worsen episodes, discussing alternatives with your doctor might be worthwhile. If sleep deprivation is a trigger, protecting sleep time becomes a priority. For children, ensuring they empty their bladder before bed can reduce episodes triggered by the sensation of needing to urinate. Waking them briefly after they've been asleep for an hour or two just enough to use the bathroom and resettle, can sometimes prevent episodes that would otherwise occur later in the night. Scheduled awakening is an interesting technique specifically for children with predictable sleepwalking patterns. If a child typically sleepwalks at roughly the same time each night, say, about 90 minutes after falling asleep, parents can gently wake the child shortly before that time, just enough to cause a brief arousal, and then let them fall back asleep. This disrupts the deep sleep cycle that would have led to sleepwalking, essentially resetting the sleep architecture. When used consistently for several weeks, scheduled awakening can break the cycle and reduce episode frequency. Cognitive behavioral therapy, specifically adapted for insomnia and sleep disorders, can be helpful for adults whose sleepwalking is associated with anxiety about sleep itself. The therapy addresses thought patterns and behaviors that perpetuate sleep problems, teaches relaxation techniques, and helps people develop healthier relationships with sleep. Hypnosis has shown some effectiveness for sleepwalking, particularly for people who are good hypnotic subjects. The hypnotherapist works with the person to create suggestions that they'll remain safely in bed throughout the night, or that they'll wake fully if they begin to leave the bed. The mechanism isn't fully understood, but for some people, hypnotic suggestion seems to reduce the frequency or intensity of episodes. Imagery rehearsal therapy involves, while awake, mentally rehearsing alternate behaviors for situations that trigger sleepwalking. For instance, if you know you often sleepwalk when you feel too hot, you'd practice imagining yourself feeling hot during sleep, and then imagining yourself simply removing a blanket while staying in bed, rather than getting up and wandering. By repeatedly rehearsing these alternative responses, you're essentially creating new motor programs that might be accessed during sleep states. Medications are typically reserved for cases where sleepwalking is frequent, dangerous, or hasn't responded to behavioral interventions. There's no medication specifically approved for treating sleepwalking, but several classes of medications are used off-label with varying success. Benzodiazepines, particularly clonazepam, are commonly prescribed for sleepwalking. These medications suppress deep sleep and reduce arousals, thereby reducing the likelihood of episodes. They're generally effective, but concerns about dependency, tolerance, and potential cognitive effects mean they're usually prescribed for short-term use or intermittent use during high-risk periods rather than as long-term solutions. Antidepressants, particularly SSRIs and tricyclic antidepressants like imipramine, sometimes help with sleepwalking, particularly when the episodes are associated with depression or anxiety. The mechanism isn't entirely clear. It might relate to effects on serotonin systems involved in sleep regulation, or it might work indirectly by improving the underlying mood disorder that was contributing to sleep disruption. Melatonin, the hormone that regulates sleep-wake cycles, is sometimes used to help stabilize sleep architecture. It's not directly treating the sleepwalking, but rather helping to strengthen circadian rhythms and improve overall sleep quality. Melatonin is generally safe with few side effects, making it an appealing option particularly for children, though evidence for its effectiveness specifically for sleepwalking is mixed. When to see a sleep specialist depends on several factors. If sleepwalking episodes are frequent, dangerous, or causing significant distress or impairment in daily functioning, professional evaluation is warranted. If episodes begin suddenly in adulthood without a history of childhood sleepwalking, this deserves investigation because it might indicate underlying neurological or psychiatric conditions. If episodes are associated with other concerning symptoms, loud snoring, gasping during sleep, excessive daytime sleepiness, or sudden muscle weakness, these might indicate other sleep disorders requiring treatment. A sleep specialist will take a detailed history, often asking you to keep a sleep diary documenting episodes, potential triggers, sleep schedules, and other relevant factors. They might recommend polysomnography, An overnight sleep study conducted in a sleep lab. During polysomnography, your brain waves, eye movements, muscle activity, heart rate, breathing, and blood oxygen levels are all monitored throughout the night. This can reveal whether other sleep disorders like sleep apnea are present and might even capture a sleepwalking episode, providing valuable diagnostic information. Video polysomnography is particularly useful for parasomnias because it records what you're doing physically while simultaneously recording all the physiological measurements. If an episode occurs during the study, specialists can see exactly what the brain and body are doing, helping to distinguish sleepwalking from other conditions that might look similar. Sometimes the evaluation reveals that what seemed like sleepwalking is actually something else. Nocturnal seizures can cause nighttime behaviors that resemble sleepwalking. REM sleep behavior disorder, where the normal paralysis during REM sleep doesn't occur, allows people to act out dreams in ways that might be confused with sleepwalking. Distinguishing between these conditions requires expert evaluation because treatments differ. For people with severe, refractory sleepwalking, cases where nothing else has worked, more intensive interventions might be considered. Some sleep centers offer specialized behavioral programs with close monitoring and systematic intervention. In rare cases, medications typically used for other conditions, like certain anti-seizure medications, might be tried. Living with sleepwalking as a chronic condition means accepting that episodes might continue to occur occasionally, even with good management. The goal isn't necessarily to eliminate episodes entirely, but to reduce their frequency and dangerousness to a level where they don't significantly impact quality of life. Many people with sleepwalking learn to live comfortably with their condition by maintaining good sleep habits, implementing appropriate safety measures, and having plans in place for managing episodes when they occur. For partners and family members living with someone who sleepwalks, education and communication are crucial. Understanding that the person isn't in control during episodes, that they truly don't remember what they've done, and that they're not intentionally being difficult or disruptive, helps family members respond with patience rather than frustration. Having clear plans for what to do when episodes occur reduces panic and confusion. Children who sleepwalk often feel embarrassed or anxious about their episodes, particularly as they get older and become more aware of how unusual their behavior is. Parents can help by normalizing the condition, explaining that many children experience it and that it's not their fault. Teaching children about safety measures and involving them age-appropriately in managing their condition helps them feel less helpless and more in control. The psychological impact of sleepwalking shouldn't be dismissed. Waking up to discover you've done things you don't remember can be unsettling. Worrying about what you might do during future episodes can create anxiety that worsens sleep quality. For some people, working with a therapist familiar with sleep disorders helps process these feelings and develop coping strategies. The hopeful message is that sleepwalking, while mysterious and sometimes frightening, is manageable. With appropriate strategies tailored to individual triggers and patterns, most people can reduce episode frequency significantly. Many children outgrow it entirely. Adults who continue experiencing episodes can usually live safely and comfortably with appropriate management. The key is understanding your specific situation, implementing appropriate strategies, and not hesitating to seek professional help when needed. Perhaps nothing captures the eerie essence of sleepwalking quite like Shakespeare's famous scene in Macbeth. Lady Macbeth, consumed by guilt over her role in murder, walks through the castle at night with a candle, compulsively washing her hands and speaking of the blood she cannot cleanse. "Out, damned spot," she cries, rubbing her hands together endlessly, trying to remove stains that exist only in her conscience. The doctor observing her notes, you see her eyes are open, but their sense is shut. Shakespeare, writing in the early 1600s, captured something profound about how sleepwalking appears to observers. The open eyes that don't truly see, the apparent purposefulness masking absence of conscious will, the way sleepwalkers seem to be acting out internal dramas invisible to onlookers. He understood that sleepwalking could serve as a powerful metaphor for guilt, unconscious knowledge, and the mind's inability to rest when burdened by terrible secrets. Lady Macbeth's sleepwalking scene has become perhaps the most famous depiction of the phenomenon in Western literature. It established sleepwalking as a dramatic device for revealing hidden truths and internal psychological states. The character can speak aloud things she would never consciously admit, performing actions that betray what her waking mind attempts to conceal. Shakespeare intuited something that modern psychology would later confirm, that our sleeping brains process the emotional weight of our experiences, even if sleepwalking itself isn't caused by guilt or psychological distress. Gothic literature of the 18th and 19th centuries found sleepwalking irresistible as a plot device. The Gothic genre thrived on the uncanny, on boundaries between life and death, consciousness and unconsciousness, the natural and supernatural. Sleepwalking provided all of this. A person neither fully alive in the conscious sense nor truly asleep, occupying a liminal space perfect for Gothic atmosphere. In Anne Radcliffe's novels, characters sleepwalk through castle corridors at night, sometimes witnessing things that advance the plot, sometimes putting themselves in danger, always creating opportunities for mystery and suspense. Gothic heroines would sleepwalk toward cliff edges or out onto dangerous balconies, requiring dramatic rescues. These scenes played on contemporary beliefs that sleepwalkers were somehow guided by forces beyond themselves, perhaps drawn toward danger by malevolent spirits. The Romantics found in sleepwalking a symbol for the power of the unconscious mind, for aspects of ourselves that exist beyond rational control. In an era fascinated by dreams, mesmerism, and the hidden depths of human psychology, sleepwalking represented the idea that we might not fully know ourselves, that mysterious forces operated within us below the surface of conscious awareness. As literature moved into the modern era, sleepwalking continued to appear, but often with more psychological nuance. Henry James's The Turn of the Screw features characters whose nighttime wanderings might be sleepwalking or might be something more sinister. The ambiguity is part of the story's power. Is the young boy Miles truly wandering at night, or is the governess imagining it in her overwrought state? The uncertainty reflects James's interest in the unreliability of perception and the thin line between the psychological and the supernatural. In cinema, sleepwalking has provided countless memorable scenes. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, the influential 1920 German expressionist film, features a somnambulist, a sleepwalker, named Césaire, who is controlled by the sinister Dr. Caligari and used to commit murders. The film draws on older beliefs about sleepwalkers being controllable or influenced by outside forces, but its true interest is in exploring control, manipulation, and the exploitation of those who exist in altered states. Horror films have frequently used sleepwalking for scares, though often with questionable accuracy. Characters sleepwalk out of windows, off roofs, or into danger with regularity in horror cinema. The blank-eyed sleepwalker has become a visual shorthand for someone being controlled by external forces, whether demons, alien influence, or psychological manipulation. The trope persists because sleepwalking's real characteristics, the open but unseeing eyes, the lack of normal responsiveness, are genuinely unsettling to witness. Comedy has also found material in sleepwalking, though the humor often comes from misunderstandings or the absurd situations sleepwalkers find themselves in. Characters wake up in strange places, discover they've done inexplicable things while asleep, or have to piece together their nighttime activities from evidence left behind. While these comedic treatments are gentler than horror's approach, they still play on the fundamental strangeness of performing actions without conscious awareness or memory. Television shows have explored sleepwalking in various ways. Medical dramas like House and Grey's Anatomy have featured episodes about patients with sleepwalking disorders, often using the condition to explore themes about control, consciousness, and identity. Crime procedurals have dealt with legal cases involving sleepwalking, grappling with questions about responsibility and intent when actions occur during sleep. The Sopranos used sleepwalking in a particularly interesting way, with Tony Soprano's sleepwalking representing his psychological distress and the parts of himself he tried to keep suppressed. His sleepwalking episodes occurred during periods of particular stress and inner conflict, and the show used them to reveal aspects of his character that he couldn't consciously acknowledge. Different cultures have portrayed sleepwalking through their own particular lenses, reflecting cultural beliefs about sleep, consciousness, and the relationship between mind and body. Asian cinema, particularly Japanese horror, has explored sleepwalking in the context of spiritual possession or curses, drawing on traditional beliefs about spirits and the vulnerability of sleep states. Indigenous storytelling traditions sometimes feature sleepwalking-like states in the context of spiritual journeys or shamanic experiences. Altered states where the person's consciousness travels while the body remains behind or acts without normal awareness. These aren't presented as medical conditions, but as spiritually significant experiences that blur boundaries between the physical and spiritual worlds. Folk tales from various cultures feature sleepwalkers, often with supernatural explanations. In some European folk traditions, sleepwalkers were believed to be particularly vulnerable to being led astray by spirits or fairies during their nighttime wanderings. In others, sleepwalking was seen as a sign that the person was being called by supernatural forces or was experiencing prophetic visions. Modern literature continues to find new angles on sleepwalking. Contemporary novels use it to explore themes about consciousness, memory, and identity in sophisticated ways. Science fiction has imagined futures where sleepwalking might be technologically induced or controlled, or where our understanding of consciousness has evolved to the point where sleepwalking represents something entirely different than how we currently understand it. Children's literature has treated sleepwalking with varying approaches. Some children's books use sleepwalking as a gentle adventure. The child protagonist sleepwalks and has nighttime experiences that feel magical or special, with no real danger present. These stories help normalize sleepwalking for children who experience it, making it less frightening and more simply unusual. Other children's books address the fear and confusion that sleepwalking can create for kids, using stories to help them understand what's happening and to feel less alone. These books often include educational elements, explaining what sleepwalking is in age-appropriate terms while wrapping the information in an engaging narrative. Poetry has captured sleepwalking's dreamlike quality, its occupying of spaces between waking and sleeping. Poets have used sleepwalking as metaphor for dissociation, for moving through life without full presence, for performing the motions of living without genuine engagement. The image of the sleepwalker, present but absent, moving but not choosing, seeing but not perceiving, offers rich symbolic possibilities. Visual art has depicted sleepwalkers, often emphasizing the blank expression and the sense of being moved by forces beyond conscious control. Paintings of sleepwalkers tend toward the romantic or the eerie, capturing that uncanny quality that makes sleepwalking so visually distinctive. Photographers have attempted to capture the strangeness of sleepwalking, though the static nature of photography struggles to convey the movement that makes sleepwalking so unsettling. What's interesting about sleepwalking's cultural portrayals is how they've evolved alongside scientific understanding. Early depictions drew heavily on supernatural explanations and fears. As sleep science developed, cultural representations became more nuanced, incorporating psychological and neurological perspectives, while often maintaining the symbolic richness that made sleepwalking compelling for storytelling. Contemporary portrayals often try to balance accuracy with dramatic effect. Filmmakers and writers research sleepwalking to ground their depictions in reality while still using it for dramatic purposes. The result is often a hybrid, more accurate than earlier sensationalized depictions, but still emphasizing the aspects of sleepwalking that serve narrative purposes. The persistence of sleepwalking in our cultural imagination reflects something deeper than just its usefulness as a plot device. Sleepwalking fascinates us because it challenges our assumptions about consciousness and control. We like to think we're unified beings, that we're either awake and in control or asleep and inactive. Sleepwalking reveals that the reality is more complex. That consciousness isn't an on-off switch, that our brains can be in multiple states simultaneously, that we might act without awareness or memory. These cultural explorations of sleepwalking, whether in literature, film, visual art, or other media, serve purposes beyond entertainment. They help us process the strangeness of this phenomenon, make sense of experiences that seem to violate fundamental assumptions about how minds and bodies work, and explore questions about responsibility, consciousness, and the nature of self that sleepwalking raises in particularly stark ways. Some sleepwalking cases are so remarkable, so seemingly impossible, that they've become famous. Not just within sleep medicine circles, but in the broader public consciousness. These cases test the boundaries of what we believe sleepwalking can involve, raise troubling questions about consciousness and responsibility, and remind us that the sleeping brain is capable of far more than we might imagine. One of the most famous and controversial cases involved Kenneth Parks, a 23-year-old Canadian man with significant money troubles and family stress. On the night of May 23, 1987, Parks apparently got out of bed, got in his car, and drove 14 miles to his in-laws' house. Once there, he attacked them with a knife, killing his mother-in-law and seriously injuring his father-in-law. He then drove to a police station and turned himself in, saying, "I think I killed some people. My hands." Parks had no memory of the events. He claimed he'd been asleep during the entire incident. His defense argued that he'd been sleepwalking during the attack and therefore couldn't be held criminally responsible because he lacked conscious intent. This raised profound questions. Can someone really drive a car while sleepwalking? Can they perform complex, violent actions while genuinely asleep? Should someone be held responsible for actions performed during a sleepwalking episode? The case went to trial, where sleep experts testified about Parks' history. He had a documented family history of sleepwalking and other sleep disorders. He'd been under tremendous stress and had severely disrupted sleep in the weeks before the incident. EEG studies of his sleep showed unusual patterns consistent with parasomnia disorders. The prosecution argued that no one could perform such complex actions while truly asleep, that Parks must have been at least partially conscious. After extensive expert testimony, the jury found Parks not guilty by reason of automatism, a legal term meaning he acted without conscious control. The verdict was controversial and remains debated. Supporters point to the evidence of his genuine parasomnia disorder, his lack of motive, he had a good relationship with his in-laws, and the incomplete memories and injuries he sustained. He'd severely cut his hands during the attack but hadn't sought treatment, suggesting he wasn't fully aware. Critics argue that driving 14 miles and performing targeted violence exceeds what should be possible during a true sleepwalking episode. The case established important legal precedents about sleepwalking as a defense, but also raised concerns about the possibility of fabricating such defenses. Subsequent legal cases involving sleepwalking defenses have been examined extremely carefully, with courts requiring extensive documentation of prior parasomnia history and expert testimony about whether the specific behaviors are consistent with genuine sleepwalking. Another remarkable case involved a British woman who, in 2008, sent email messages from her computer while sleepwalking. The emails were to friends and included invitations to come over, casual conversation, and made references to upcoming events. The content wasn't random gibberish. It was coherent enough that recipients didn't realize anything was amiss. The woman discovered what she'd done only when friends responded to her emails, and she had no memory of sending them. This case demonstrates the complexity of behaviors possible during sleepwalking. Using a computer requires multiple steps: turning it on, navigating to email, typing coherent messages, sending them. These are learned behaviors, routines the woman performed regularly when awake, and somehow her sleeping brain accessed these motor programs and executed them. The content of the emails, while coherent, was apparently somewhat odd. Friends later said the tone was slightly off. The topics random, suggesting the higher-level organization of thought wasn't functioning normally, even if the basic language and typing skills were accessible. Sleep driving cases, while rare, are more common than many people realize, particularly among people taking certain sleep medications. In 2006, several cases emerged of people on the sleep medication Ambien, zolpidem, who engaged in sleep driving. These individuals would take their medication, fall asleep, then at some point during the night, get up, get in their cars, and drive. Sometimes short distances, sometimes longer trips. Most had no memory of driving, discovered their nighttime activities only through evidence like unfamiliar locations when they woke, tickets from police, or accidents. One particularly dramatic case involved a woman who drove several miles on a highway, collided with another vehicle, and was found by police walking along the roadside in her pajamas with no idea how she'd gotten there. Investigation revealed she'd taken Ambien before bed, and her behavior was consistent with a parasomnia rather than conscious impairment. These cases led to increased warnings on sleep medications about the possibility of complex sleep behaviors, including driving, and highlighted the need for careful use of sedative medications. A less dramatic but fascinating case involved a musician who would play piano during sleepwalking episodes. His family would sometimes hear him playing in the middle of the night, go downstairs, and find him sitting at the piano, playing complex pieces, eyes open, but with that characteristic blank stare of sleepwalking. The music he played was from his repertoire, pieces he knew well and had played many times. When gently guided back to bed, he'd comply without resistance and had no memory of the nighttime concerts the next morning. This case illustrates how sleepwalking can access highly trained motor sequences. The man's years of piano practice had created strong motor programs in his brain, patterns of finger movements and musical patterns that could apparently be activated and executed during sleep. The playing wasn't creative improvisation. It was retrieval and performance of learned material, suggesting that procedural memory for how to do things, remains accessible during sleepwalking even when episodic memory for events and conscious experiences, is offline. Sleep-eating cases have produced some remarkable stories. One woman would prepare and eat elaborate meals during the night with no memory of doing so. Her family installed a camera in the kitchen and captured her sleepwalking episodes. The footage showed her methodically gathering ingredients, using the stove, assembling complex dishes, eating them, and then returning to bed. The next morning, she'd discover the evidence: dirty dishes, food missing from the refrigerator, with no recollection of the nighttime meal preparation. What made this case particularly interesting was the food she prepared during sleep. Often unusual combinations she wouldn't eat while awake, or items prepared in strange ways. This suggested that while her motor skills for cooking were accessible, her conscious taste preferences and food judgments weren't operating normally. She was drawing on cooking skills without the normal executive function that would guide what to cook or how to combine ingredients. A troubling category of cases involves violence or sexual behavior during sleepwalking. These are legally and ethically complex, requiring careful investigation to distinguish genuine parasomnia from conscious actions being falsely attributed to sleepwalking. Legitimate cases exist where people have harmed others or engaged in inappropriate sexual behavior during genuine sleepwalking episodes, usually when they were confused or frightened and responded to perceived threats, or when the episode involved complex behaviors from their normal repertoire that were enacted inappropriately during sleep. However, distinguishing genuine from fabricated cases requires expert evaluation. Real parasomnia violence typically occurs early in the night during deep sleep, involves immediate and excessive response to perceived threats rather than sustained or purposeful violence, is brief, and the person has difficulty awakening and appears confused afterward. They typically have a documented history of parasomnias. The violence in genuine cases is usually not targeted or planned, and there's no attempt to conceal evidence afterward. Fabricated defenses, in contrast, often involve violence that occurs during times when deep sleep is less likely, is sustained and goal-directed, involves actions to conceal evidence, and the person fully awakens afterward without the prolonged confusion characteristic of arousal from deep sleep. The legal system has developed expertise in evaluating these cases, though mistakes can occur in both directions. Accepting fabricated defenses or failing to recognize genuine parasomnias. A particularly bizarre case involved a man who repeatedly sent text messages from his phone during sleep. The messages were to various contacts and were often nonsensical or contextually inappropriate. One night he texted his boss to quit his job, a message he didn't remember sending, and had to awkwardly explain and retract the next day. Another night he texted an ex-girlfriend with rambling messages that required later explanation. The case came to light when he sought medical help for his frequent episodes. An analysis confirmed he was experiencing complex sleepwalking behavior that included phone use. Children's sleepwalking sometimes produces remarkable stories, though they're typically less dramatic than adult cases. Kids have been found organizing their toys at night, dressing themselves in strange combinations of clothes, or having conversations while asleep that make some sense contextually, but are clearly not conscious communication. Parents often report that their sleepwalking children will respond to simple questions or commands, can be guided back to bed, but are clearly not truly awake during these interactions. One notable childhood case involved a boy who would regularly sleepwalk to the kitchen and try to make breakfast in the middle of the night. His parents would hear sounds from the kitchen around 2 or 3 a.m., go investigate, and find him pulling out cereal boxes, bowls, and attempting to pour milk, often missing the bowl. He'd comply when guided back to bed and remembered nothing in the morning. The case was resolved through safety measures, keeping his bedroom door alarmed so parents would be alerted, and improved sleep hygiene that reduced episode frequency. What unites these remarkable cases is that they push the boundaries of what we think is possible during sleep. They challenge our intuitions about consciousness, demonstrate that the sleeping brain can access complex learned behaviors, and raise troubling questions about responsibility and awareness. While most sleepwalking episodes are far less dramatic, simple walking around, perhaps some confused activities, then returning to bed. These famous cases remind us that the sleeping brain remains capable of surprising complexity, even when conscious awareness is profoundly diminished. Sleepwalking is just one member of a larger family of sleep disorders called parasomnias. Unwanted events or experiences that occur during sleep or sleep-wake transitions. Understanding these related conditions helps place sleepwalking in context and reveals the remarkable variety of ways our sleep can become disrupted or unusual. Sleep terrors, also called night terrors, share sleepwalking's origin in deep non-REM sleep but manifest very differently. During a sleep terror, the person, usually a child, suddenly sits up or bolts from bed, often screaming or crying out in apparent terror. Their eyes are wide open, they're breathing rapidly, sweating heavily, and their heart is racing. They appear absolutely terrified, but they're not actually awake, and they're not responding to the real environment. Parents witnessing a child's sleep terror often describe it as one of the most disturbing experiences of parenting. The child looks awake and looks terrified, and every parental instinct says to comfort them. But attempts to hold, soothe, or comfort the child during a sleep terror are usually ineffective. The child doesn't recognize the parent, doesn't respond appropriately to comfort, and might even push away or become more agitated when someone tries to hold them. Sleep terrors typically last several minutes, though they can feel much longer to witnesses. The episode eventually ends with the child either calming and settling back to sleep, or sometimes transitioning into full waking with confusion about why everyone is so upset. In the morning, the child usually has no memory of the episode, though they might have vague, dreamlike impressions of feeling afraid. Sleep terrors differ from nightmares in crucial ways. Nightmares occur during REM sleep, usually in the later part of the night, and the person is having a frightening dream. When awakened from a nightmare, the person wakes fully, can describe the scary dream, and is consolable. Sleep terrors happen during deep non-REM sleep early in the night, don't involve detailed dream narratives, and the person can't be easily consoled because they're not actually processing their real environment. Like sleepwalking, sleep terrors are most common in young children and typically resolve as the child's brain matures. They share the same triggers: sleep deprivation, stress, fever, and irregular sleep schedules. The two conditions often co-occur in the same child, and it's not unusual for an episode to begin as a sleep terror and then transition into sleepwalking as the child gets up and moves around while still in this confused, frightened state. Confusional arousals are another disorder of arousal from deep sleep. During a confusional arousal, the person wakes up or partially wakes up from sleep in a state of confusion that can last several minutes or even longer. They might sit up, look around, talk, but their speech is slow and confused. They don't seem to understand where they are or what's happening. They might ask questions repeatedly, give inappropriate answers to questions, or respond to the situation in ways that don't make sense. Confusional arousals are common in young children who might wake crying and confused, not recognizing parents initially or being consolable immediately. Adults can experience them too, particularly when awakened abruptly from deep sleep. The alarm clock goes off after too little sleep, and you wake up but can't immediately process what's happening, feeling like your brain is moving through thick fog. These episodes represent that same hybrid state of sleepwalking. Partial arousal from deep sleep, where some brain functions come online while others remain in sleep mode. The person is conscious in some limited way, but not processing information normally or forming clear memories of the experience. REM sleep behavior disorder is different from sleepwalking because it occurs during REM sleep rather than deep non-REM sleep. Remember that during normal REM sleep, your voluntary muscles are paralyzed to prevent you from acting out dreams. In REM sleep behavior disorder, this protective paralysis fails, allowing the person to physically act out their dreams. The behaviors during REM sleep behavior disorder episodes reflect dream content. If someone is dreaming about playing sports, they might kick or swing their arms. If they're dreaming about arguing, they might shout or gesture. If they're having a nightmare about being attacked, they might fight back physically, sometimes injuring themselves or their bed partner. REM sleep behavior disorder is more common in older adults, particularly men over 50, which distinguishes it from sleepwalking's peak in childhood. It's also concerning because it can be an early sign of neurodegenerative conditions like Parkinson's disease or Lewy body dementia. Many people who develop REM sleep behavior disorder later go on to develop these conditions, though not everyone does. The connection relates to how the same brain systems that regulate REM paralysis are affected in these neurodegenerative disorders. Treatment for REM sleep behavior disorder often involves medications that suppress REM sleep or help restore the normal paralysis, along with extensive safety measures, because the movements during episodes can be violent enough to cause serious injury. Exploding head syndrome is a parasomnia that sounds alarming but is actually harmless, though certainly startling. People with this condition experience loud noises, crashes, explosions, slamming doors during the transition from waking to sleep or from sleep to waking. The sounds aren't real. There's no external noise causing them. Instead, they're internally generated as something misfires during the sleep-wake transition, creating the perception of loud sound. Episodes typically last only a moment, but they can be quite frightening in the moment. People often report that the explosion feels like it's happening inside their head. Sometimes there's a flash of light accompanying the sound. While it can be disturbing, exploding head syndrome doesn't indicate any serious underlying condition and doesn't cause lasting harm. Many people experience it occasionally during periods of stress or sleep deprivation. Sleep paralysis is another parasomnia occurring during sleep-wake transitions, specifically when falling asleep or waking up. During sleep paralysis, you're mentally awake and aware, but your body is still in the paralyzed state of REM sleep. You can't move, can't speak, can't open your eyes, or they might be open, but you can't move them freely. The experience typically lasts from a few seconds to a couple of minutes, but feels much longer. What makes sleep paralysis particularly frightening for many people is that it's often accompanied by hallucinations. You might sense a presence in the room, feel like someone or something is watching you, or even see, hear, or feel entities around you. Some people report feeling pressure on their chest, as if something is sitting on them. The combination of being unable to move with these frightening sensory experiences can be absolutely terrifying. Sleep paralysis has been recognized across cultures throughout history, with different cultural interpretations. Medieval Europeans spoke of being hag-ridden. Japanese culture describes kanashibari. Many cultures have folklore about demons or spirits that attack sleepers, likely inspired by sleep paralysis experiences. Modern understanding reveals the neurological basis. The normal REM paralysis occurring without full transition to either waking or sleeping, creating this liminal state where consciousness is present but motor control is not. While sleep paralysis is frightening, it's not dangerous. The experience will end on its own, usually within minutes, and no harm comes from the paralysis itself. Knowing what's happening, that you're experiencing sleep paralysis, that the hallucinations aren't real, that it will pass, can help reduce fear during episodes. Sleep paralysis is more common during periods of sleep deprivation, irregular sleep schedules, and stress, the same factors that trigger other parasomnias. Rhythmic movement disorders involve repetitive movements during sleep, most commonly head banging or body rocking. These are most common in infants and young children, with up to 60% of 9-month-olds showing some rhythmic movement during sleep. Head banging, where the child repeatedly bangs their head against the mattress or crib rails, looks alarming, but typically doesn't cause injury, and most children outgrow it by age 3 or 4. The movements seem to be self-soothing, helping the child fall asleep or return to sleep. Adults rarely have rhythmic movement disorders, though some people do maintain body rocking as a sleep-onset behavior into adulthood. When rhythmic movements persist or begin in adulthood, particularly if they're intense enough to cause injury, they warrant evaluation because they might indicate underlying neurological or psychiatric conditions. Nightmare disorder is diagnosed when frequent nightmares cause significant distress or impair functioning. Everyone has occasional bad dreams, but people with nightmare disorder have frequent, vivid, disturbing dreams that wake them, cause anticipatory anxiety about sleep, and affect their quality of life. Unlike sleep terrors, nightmares are remembered in detail and occur during REM sleep. Treatment for nightmare disorder often involves imagery rehearsal therapy, where the person, while awake, rehearses alternate endings for recurring nightmares or practices confronting nightmare themes in empowering ways. The idea is to create new neural patterns that might alter how the dreams unfold. Addressing underlying trauma, anxiety, or PTSD often reduces nightmare frequency, since nightmares are common symptoms of these conditions. Sleep-related hallucinations can occur when falling asleep, hypnagogic, or waking up, hypnopompic. These are sensory experiences, visual, auditory, tactile, or even olfactory, that occur in the borderland between sleeping and waking. They feel completely real in the moment, but are generated by the brain rather than representing actual external stimuli. These hallucinations are surprisingly common, with many people experiencing them occasionally. They're more frequent during stress, sleep deprivation, or irregular sleep schedules. The hallucinations can be benign, seeing patterns or lights, hearing music or voices, or disturbing, particularly when they involve sensing presences or seeing figures. Like other parasomnias, they reflect the brain's transitions between states not proceeding smoothly, with dream-generating systems activating while the person is at least partially conscious. What unites all these parasomnias is that they represent states where the normal boundaries between waking, sleeping, and different sleep stages become blurred. They're glitches in the complex system that manages our sleep-wake cycle. While each parasomnia has specific features and mechanisms, they share the quality of creating experiences that feel surreal and out of place. Moments when the brain is caught between states and producing phenomena that seem to violate the normal rules of consciousness. Understanding that sleepwalking belongs to this larger family of parasomnias helps normalize it. You're not alone in having sleep experiences that seem strange or impossible. Many people experience various parasomnias, particularly during childhood or periods of stress and poor sleep. The sleeping brain is capable of producing a wide range of unusual experiences, and most of these, including sleepwalking, are manageable and don't indicate serious underlying problems. Tonight, we've traveled through centuries of human understanding about sleepwalking, from ancient beliefs about wandering spirits to modern neuroscience, revealing the brain regions active during these peculiar episodes. What emerges from all this exploration is a picture of sleepwalking as something both more ordinary and more remarkable than we might have thought. It's a neurological quirk that affects millions of people, usually harmlessly, often outgrown with time. Yet it also reveals profound truths about the complexity of consciousness, the mysteries of sleep, and the remarkable capabilities of our brains even when we're not consciously directing them. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the curious world of sleepwalking. If you're already drifting off, then our mission is complete. But if you're still awake, perhaps another deep dive through one of our previous episodes will carry you gently into slumber. Until we meet again in these quiet hours, may your sleep be deep and restorative. May your dreams be gentle. And may any nighttime wanderings lead you safely back to bed, with nothing more mysterious than the soft light of dawn and the promise of a new day ahead.